Let's see if I remember what I was doing. Monsieur Fogg cast up his accounts, as the English say, all over a shrub, and then fell into a feverish daze. We were forced to stay put. The local doctor says my master has contracted cholera and must rest until he's recovered. Cholera, no doubt our stay in Manila is responsible for his malady. I don't know if I can do anything to save you, sir. My master cannot seem to keep down a bite of food or a sip of water. He bears it all with uncomplaining silence. But I will not record the detail of his suffering here. It is most unpleasant. Monsieur Fogg decided we had dallied long enough and attempted to leave the hotel. Alas, it was not 5 minutes before he had to make a dash for the conveniences. How long will this last? I don't know if I can do anything to help you, sir. I guess we'll just stay here. We're out of time. I spent the morning coaxing my master to drink a sip of water and then another. I am not a child, he said sternly, but then drinks meekly. I believe he is returning to health. Indeed, I see a color on his cheek once more. Monsieur Fogg's fever broke this morning. He has lost a good deal of weight and is still a little unsteady. I'll have to be more careful of his health in future. Thank you for your tending, he said, simply adjusting his cravat. Now it's past time we left this place. Don't you agree? I think we might have to wait again. Because you were, ill for so long. We passed an anxious night with our 80-day deadline looming. Every sunset seemed to carry extra weight. Before retiring, my serious concerns about Monsieur Fogg made me seek out a doctor. He touched my master's forehead. A mild fever, I would say. 3 days to recover to full strength. It was too long. We could not afford to wait. The doctor sighed, did what he could, and left. Day 62, Monsieur Fogg murmured that night in his sleep, and still some distance yet to travel. We boarded a steam barge from Honolulu to San Francisco. The scent of ripe bananas pervaded every plank of decking and bulkhead, a sweet and delicious rotting odor which offended my train senses so greatly that for many months after I could scarcely look a banana in the peel. Cholera spreading from Manila aboard airships. That's not good. I have attempted to convince my mouth that I ate fried kippers and potatoes at breakfast. Everything smells of bananas. Monsieur Fogg replied that he could not smell a thing, which I took to be his queerly English sense of humor at work. Still, if bananas were to be the worst of my troubles aboard this boat, then that would be no bad thing. I woke in the middle of the night, convinced that someone was in the cabin with me. I stayed very still and listened. There was long, wave-lapped silence until I heard distinctly a dragging shuffle. I opened my eyes and looked up, my heart beating impossibly loud in my chest. In the darkness I saw the sheen of a pair of eyes, gazing vacantly into the distance. "Monsieur Fogg!" I cried, and my midnight visitor blinked and straightened and looked about my cabin in genteel surprise. "What?" he said calmly, pulling his dressing gown closed. "Am I doing in your cabin?" "Scaring me half to death," I cried, rather upturned by his sudden appearance. He took a sharp breath. "It seems I have been sleepwalking," he said, his voice almost tremulous. "I have not done so since I was a child. Please accept my apology." I let him take his leave. He seemed strangely agitated. I pulled the thin blanket over my body and settled back into bed, hoping to find my way towards sleep before dawn. I probably should just another one. I thought about it. I don't know why I didn't. Captain Kalani was a heavily pregnant Hawaiian woman who found Monsieur Fogg's English accent a source of great mirth. "Say something else," she demanded over breakfast. "Please, Mr. Fogg." I distracted her with some idle talk, and my master cast me a grateful look. All in a day's work for a valet of my unimpeccable caliber. Well, at least I improved them a little bit. I awoke to a frantic knocking at my door and opened it to find Monsieur Fogg actually wringing his hands. He said, his breath hitching. "Come quickly." "What's wrong, monsieur?" I cried, certain that something truly unspeakable was afoot, and I was not wrong. My master opened the door to his cabin to reveal Captain Kalani. Red-faced and moaning upon his bed, she turned her baleful gaze in our direction. "I am having my baby early," she hissed, sweat upon her upper lip. "You must help me." "What should I do?" I had intended to ask a question, but it came out more like a shout. "Will one of you hold my bloody hand and the other fetch some blasted water?" she retorted. I glanced at Monsieur Fogg, who said, "I'll fetch the water," and left me to hold the Captain Kalani's hand. "Is the baby's father not aboard?" I inquired, grimacing as she squeezed my fingers so hard I feared I would be left with pulp. "He is at home," she gasped, "tending to the farm. Can we get on?" Monsieur Fogg returned with a bucket of water, but our respite was short-lived. Captain Kalani parted her knees. "One of you," she said authoritatively, "must catch the baby." We did it together. Monsieur Fogg did not trust me not to drop it. I did not trust Monsieur Fogg not to faint clean away. After an infinitely long, infinitely terrifying interval, which I have not the means to describe, I had a small, squalling, red-faced baby in my arms. I took off my own jacket and wiped the birth fluids from the baby's face, calling it a worthwhile loss. Then I gave it to her. "It is a girl," I said into the sudden hush. Captain Kalani was sweaty and wild-eyed and utterly exhausted. She held the baby to her chest as though it were an infinitely precious thing. She began to sing to her little girl, a song of whales and oceans, waves and airships that hung like moons in the sky. Captain Kalani's indisposition the previous day did not delay us in the least. She had a well-trained and loyal crew who seemed to have collectively adopted her little girl as one of their own. "I will call her Jean," Captain Kalani told us as we tethered at San Francisco. "You are excellent midwives." I was overcome and ducked my head like a boy from the countryside. "The name suits her, madame," I said. "She will wear it better than I have." I turned toward San Francisco Bay with renewed hope. After all, whatever challenges it offered could scarcely be more taxing than those we had just overcome. San Francisco seemed less a city and more a ravenous beast bent on consumption of everything, even of itself, within the ever-expanding city limits. The building works made it tricky to talk to anyone. Such was the infernal constant noise. I sloped towards recently constructed Long Bridge, which was crowded with families out for a stroll and people fishing for silvery smelt with long poles. In the water was a jangle of rowing boats racing each other and boatmen taking passengers out to Mission Rock. Cheers and good-natured shouts emitted from a halfway house in the middle of the bridge. I scoured the water for boats we might take, but there seemed to be none heading out. All were fishing. A man, red-faced and somewhat the worse for drink, bumped into me. I excused myself politely, and he made an apology in return, slinging an arm around my shoulder. "Oh, hello," he exclaimed. "You don't sound like you are from around here." "You do not sound American either," I retorted. "No matter. I was Dutch once, in a past life, but now I am an American as President Grant. This is a land of newcomers. You a prospector?" "I am a traveler," I said. "I am traveling around the world." He laughed. "Oh, yeah? And I'm a Navajo chief." I insisted on the truth, sketching out in brief some of my adventures with my master. "What, really?" His eyes widened. He slapped his thigh. "That's incredible." A brown-skinned woman slipped her arm into his. I regarded her. She was wearing a ruffled walking dress in the latest European style, but with a short tassel jacket embroidered with the patterns of her tribe. "Ah, my manners," he shook his ruddy face. "I am Anders, and this is my wife, Ginny." "A pleasure to meet you." I kissed her hand. She was surprised but smiled. "Always a pleasure to meet Anders' friends." She looked askance at the whiskey flask in his hands, but seemed to find me unobjectable. I hesitated, the obvious question about her origins on the tip of my tongue. I swallowed back the question, though clearly with a visible effort, for she laughed with full-throated pleasure. "I am of the Modoc tribe, which the new Americans call Indians." Ginny rolled her eyes. "I do not mind your surprise. Most of my tribe has been taken to the Klamath Reservation, Oregon." "But you were not with them," I observed, realizing my faux pas as the words tumbled from my unthinking lips. Ginny sucked in a deep breath. "I left my tribe," she whispered. Anders squeezed her hand. "I fell in love. In this world, women leave their families for their husbands. I made a home of my choosing, which is more freedom than my tribe can claim." Anders whispered something into Ginny's ear, and she laughed, though I feared I had opened an old wound with my prying questions. I nodded and found my way back to Monsieur Fogg, who was sitting drinking tea with a disconsolate frown. "It tastes like soap," he remarked, but would say no more. I know it was a girl. I headed towards Chinatown to eat. It was a warren of crowded wooden and brick houses, temples, businesses, herbalists, laundries, and market stalls selling fruit and flowers. Brightly colored lanterns illuminated the streets, and little draconic automata spewing black smoke called the attention of passers-by to restaurants and gambling houses. Children played games in the streets, many dressed in woolen bobble hats and coats over their changshans and whatever that word is. Large groups of men stood around smoking, drinking green tea, and calling to each other good-naturedly. I felt quite at home. I had traveled around more than half the world after all. What was one more foreignness in such a foreign place as America? I had decided to approach a young man with a queue ponytail who was relaxing outside a small shop with arms outstretched. He seemed to me to be a laborer. Despite his slender frame, his arms were heavily muscled. His name was Jing Ho, and he was enjoying his single day off from working on the Transcontinental Railway to New York. Is the line done? I asked, and he shot me a weary look. Nearly, but no. Outlaws keep stealing Lang's track. It is open to the public as far as Burlington still. I should not complain. At least I have a job. What would he do once the railway was complete? Alas, I had little time to ponder this, as I had to bid him a hasty goodbye and return to my master. We were lucky to arrive in San Francisco just in time to catch a journey along the as yet unfinished Transcontinental Express, which would take us as far as Burlington in 5 days, with only a handful of stops along the way. The first day aboard was enjoyable enough. American trains could clearly not compete with their European counterparts, but it was amusing to see them try. The posters proclaimed Pullman's Palace sleeping cars, but they were more like places to keep cattle, if reasonably well-to-do cattle. We sipped cool beer as we rattled through a long stretch of desert in the shadow of tall mountains. I tended to Monsieur Fogg and his delicate stomach, which was not entirely better today. Yay. Slowly improving that relationship. Our fellow passengers were a curious mix of gold and silver prospectors, homesteaders, farmers from all corners of the world, Mormons, missionary soldiers, and stiff-necked gentry of various sorts. I gave a young black woman with a deep red bonnet and an infectious laugh a wide smile. Her name was Diana. I am meeting my husband in Cheyenne, she told me. He did construction work in New York, but New York isn't safe anymore. We have enough money to move now. Why isn't it safe? I queried instantly, having only the broad strokes of American news and history. You did not hear the draft riots in Europe? She asked wonderingly. New York has always had Confederate sympathies, and when the Union began drafting New Yorkers, they rioted. They killed and burned black homes. My husband has never felt safe since. But now we're moving to Cheyenne. She smiled, nearly glowing with happiness. I told her some tales of my adventures, which seemed to amuse her greatly, as the afternoon wore into evening and we passed by Ogden, close to Salt Lake City. I don't know. I've got like 12 days left. We watched as passengers disembarked, glimpsing fertile fields and well-tended ranches out of the windows of the train. I'm sure you know all about Burlington. Today, a fellow with a painfully trimmed mustache and impeccable suit approached me outside the lavatory. I made way so he could pass by, but he extended a hand to me. I am Felix Granger, he said. You are a puzzle. I was utterly flummoxed. I, a puzzle, I repeated in consternation. Monsieur, I am a simple man whose past is an open book. Oh, no, do tell me how you came to be on the Transcontinental. Thereby hangs a tale, I can tell, good sir. It seemed a probing question, which made me immediately suspicious of his motives. I made some non-committal answer, but he pressed me further. Finally, excused myself with some fabricated errand. What a strange, ill-mannered fellow. Name sounds familiar. We stopped at Cheyenne, Wyoming for a few hours in the early hours. The trim, mustached fellow disembarked to talk with a 6-foot tall woman who wore the latest slim-trained skirts and a pistol tucked into her waistband. We watched. None the wiser. At luncheon, I asked. A sturdy-looking prospector who looked out of the carriage with an expression of palpable awe. That's Esther Hobart Morris, the first woman justice of the peace in all of America, he said fervently. Ain't she something? The trim, mustached fellow boarded the train again before the last whistle blew, his face drawn and anxious. We were held up by outlaws. They dragged tree trunks over the line and forced the train to a halt before boarding, brandishing pistols and sabers. They went to carriage, demanding valuables. I looked at my master, who had a certain glint in his eye, and I did not doubt that he wished to resist these outlaws' demands, being a man with the deepest respect for the law. The lead bandit fired his gun into the air. The name, he declared, is Jesse James. Now you give me everything you've got. The saber lifted to my throat. I moved to draw my revolver, but the man knocked my hand aside. Let's all keep calm, shall we? He advised. I handed over my wallet. What else could I do? At least I did not keep all our money in the same purse. Monsieur James smiled a toothy smile and tossed me 10 pounds back in return. Buy yourself new shoes with that, he said as he proceeded to also steal my shoes. The saber point moved on. Now was Monsieur Fogg's neck. What about you? You look good for it. I jumped to his aid. He is my gentleman, I declared. I carry his possessions for him. Is that so? The outlaw declared with interest. So I should technically be taking from you twice, should I? There was no other options. I hit him. Not a heavy punch, but enough to send him reeling a touch. Then Monsieur Fogg, with a swoop, battered him over the head with a trunk and threw the man out of our carriage. Through the window I saw him being picked up by a rather surprised soldiers who waved a thank you. Then the steam engine restarted, and we were soon on our way. Not much worse for wear. Although our valuables were impounded as evidence, we did not have time to wait for the case to come to trial, but the officers compensated us a little, to the tune of over £1,000. A kind fellow passenger gave me a spare pair of shoes, and a few hours later we reached Burlington. We disembarked, grateful to have arrived in one piece. Yay! Burlington was situated on the west bank of the Mississippi River and had grown to prominence along with the steamboats that paddled up and down the long stretch of the river. The construction of the Burlington Railway route had caused a temporary influx of Chinese and Irish laborers into this town, where many of them drank and generally caused trouble, though to some townsfolk the very fact of their existence was troublesome enough. The town distinguished itself in the memory as the place where I managed to buy and then immediately burned a shirt for Monsieur Fogg. He was not terribly understanding. I apologized most profusely, and Monsieur Fogg informed me that he preferred proper action to tedious apologies. This is unlike you. I do not like it. I don't got 3 days. Another night and the clock was forever ticking upwards. We took a room and settled in, and I ran a few errands for the hotelier, earning £99. Monsieur Fogg looked dispirited. By now I was all too familiar with the look that came over my master's expression as he totaled his ledger. "To the money pot," he declared. I regarded the bank as we entered. The size of any London branch, they would no doubt look after us admirably. "You would like to make a withdrawal?" "We require £1,000. I'll communicate with the London branch to confirm. Your funds will be ready tomorrow." "2 days, eh?" Our room was decent enough, but I was sure I could not sleep. Day 73. I spent a few hours walking around and entered into conversation with a somewhat energetic Chinese woman who had mislaid a locket which I spotted, and who then, in between bouts of laughter, let it slip that the most efficient way to Washington is through New Orleans. I asked her how she knew, but she merely winked and moved away. We collected our money from the bank, and the manager bid us farewell. Day 74. As night fell, I spent a while talking to the hotelier to learn what I could, but gathered little that Monsieur Fogg would be interested in. I don't think we're going to make it. We boarded the Dark Queen, a twin-decked six-boiler stern wheel bound for New Orleans. The Mississippi was famed for the luxury of her steamboats, but also for their unfortunate tendency towards catastrophic boiler explosions. I felt rather grim at the prospect of having all my flesh parboiled like a lobster, and resolved to spend as much of the journey to Crescent City as far away from the amidships boilers as possible. The common rooms and lounges of the Dark Queen were full of gamblers enticing passengers into games of dice or cards. The river ports had been passing more and more regulation. The cheats and crooks had all fled to the unregulated waters of the Mississippi to ply their trade. A fool and his money are soon parted, so the saying went. I had little pity to waste on fools, though Monsieur Fogg clearly found the entire operation distasteful. Why did they deteriorate? Captain Latour was clearly quite cozy with the gamblers, and had something of their attitude himself. "I'll wager I can get us to New Orleans in 3 days, rather than 4, he shouted to the room at large. "Who'll take the wager?" We could use an extra day, and the captain seemed quite sure of himself. £100 on it, I called. The captain whooped before hopping off to the engine room. "Watch and learn, my friend. You'll see a record made the day." Greetings, Captain. Captain Latour ordered the something to play a tune as he mustered the crew and gave them the order to push the engines to their maximum limit. The coal shovelers scowled at the extra work involved, but the captain ignored them magnanimously. The Dark Queen's crew seemed competent enough, but as the boilers whistled and screamed, the ship began to make an ominous keening noises. I offered to help shovel coal and stripped off to my shirt sleeves. "Keep shoveling," Captain Latour shouted, tapping dials and muttering orders. He squeezed more oil into the engine crank. "We'll be in New Orleans by sundown," which was when something began to make a screaming noise. I turned about, looking astern, seeing smoke issuing from a crack in the metal, and then it was too late. The rear boiler exploded. The entire ship seemed to shudder and convulse as the sailors screamed and wept and burned. It was hell, in the literal rather than metaphysical sense, and I was right in it. We did not reach New Orleans that day, and I wondered if we ever would. It was day 76. We had barely 100 hours remaining to return home. None of the sailors died yesterday, though some no doubt wished they had. A much chastened Captain Latour moored the ship and organized boats to take them to doctors ashore. Monsieur Fogg and I were unharmed, at least physically, but there was no music or laughter on the Dark Queen's deck, and I do not think there will be for a long time. Yeah, we ain't making it. I got 2 days. The Dark Queen continued her journey down the Mississippi, though at a crawling pace. Captain Latour ordered only 2 of the 5 remaining boilers fired and had to offer double pay to them stokers to induce them. "It is my fault," I confessed to Monsieur Fogg in anguish. "I took his damned wager." My master regarded me thoughtfully. "Captain Latour took a gamble, and this time he lost. That is all." I was speechless at his cold hardness, thinking of the screams of the sailors. Something," Fogg said softly, seeing my concern. "We all must gamble. The only difference is in our calculation of the odds." We docked in New Orleans when the sun was low in the sky, glinting over the brackish water of the river and bathing the French and Spanish colonial villas of the city in soft yellow light. The captain made a beeline for us like a weary ghost, but I made sure to avoid him, hustling Monsieur Fogg onto the wharf before a ghastly wager might be settled. I wanted neither his self-pity nor his advice. The Piedmont Airline from New Orleans was not in fact an airline at all, but according to its advertising, the fastest railway in America. What could be better for getting us to the edge of the Atlantic? Winning our bet would now require a miracle, but we still had every chance of a decent showing. We settled ourselves in a carriage with one another occupant, an extremely large man who introduced himself as Charlie Sullivan, a lad from Birmingham. Who had grown into something the size of a warehouse building, with huge tracts of muscle, especially around the neck and upper arms. His mustaches were nonetheless perfect. I asked him where he was going, and he replied, "New York. I was boxing. I'm going home." "You fought at a competition," I interpreted. "There was an exhibition," he said. "I won. 3rd round knockout." I gulped. However, Monsieur Fogg's interest had been increasing sharply throughout the conversation. "You were trained," he demanded keenly, "or self-taught?" "I've got a manager," Sullivan replied. "He tells me what to hit." "Excellent, excellent," Monsieur Fogg enthused. "I want to hear all about it." I sat back and enjoyed the conversation. The details of the boxing are more intricate than one might expect. A ruffian sport for certain, but with as much finesse and fidelity as, say, the preparations of a good shirt collar. Little did I know how the details I heard would come to be of use to me. As we lay down to sleep, Monsieur Fogg murmured, "Today is day 80, passport. We have failed." Indeed. This changes nothing, however. We must still return home, and as fast as possible. That Mr. Sullivan will, I think, go very far indeed, Monsieur Fogg opined as I brought him from Kippers from the dining car. He seemed to have the physique, I suggested. Not just the physique, my master replied. Physique is not the secret. His description of the transferal of weight from foot to foot was very well understood indeed. So you are a boxer, monsieur? I saw the shutters of his conversation begin to come down. I went to school, yes. You mean you boxed as a child? He stiffened. The suggestion he had ever been a child was, I quickly saw, well beyond the pale. You should fight him, he said. I laughed at my master's joke, but Monsieur Fogg, as ever, was not joking, and he looked up at me with some surprise. Is something the matter? Forgive me. It sounded as though you said I should fight Monsieur Sullivan. Indeed, he forked another forkful. You needn't be alarmed. I can teach you to box. I'm not fighting that guy. I rolled back my sleeves. I am sure you can, monsieur, I replied, and I am a quick learner. Or at least I thought, somewhat confident in nature. Excellent, Monsieur Fogg. I'm trying so hard to make this guy like me. Put down his paper. I have arranged it for a space in the guard's van. Come. When had he done this? I do not know. I merely followed, and there was Sullivan, stripped to the waist, doing his warm-up exercises. Piss poor too, he greeted me through thick leather mouth guard. Sullivan, I declared meadily as I removed my own shirt and tried to listen as my master provided some pointers. And then the fight began. Sullivan was a tough opponent, and if he chose to swing hard, he would brain me unless I defended myself, but he would not be able to slug on every swing. I would have to pick my moments to attack. To begin with, I kept my guard up, matching Fogg's demonstration from across the card. Just as Sullivan punched hard, the blow landed against my defense. I shook it off as best I could. A small crowd had gathered to watch the fight, and they murmured with excitement. Strength and stamina are different, Monsieur Fogg called to me from the side. Your strength will come back if you swing lightly, but your stamina, once gone, will leave you out cold. I nodded to show I had heard. Sullivan's eyes narrowed. I kept my guard up, once protecting my face, while Sullivan made a quick jab. I caught the punch neatly. We were both still lively, though he was faring a little better than me. Watch it. The next swing may be harder, my master called. Next, I kept my fists up, once more protecting my face. Sullivan lifted his defenses. We circled each other nervously, neither of us badly worn, though he was looking better than me. You will have regained some muster from that block, my master shouted, so be warned. And I kept my fists up because I'm scared, once more protecting my face. Just as Sullivan snapped up his arms to block, we circled each other nervously. We were both still energetic, although he was faring a little better than me. I heard rather than saw the money changing hands. Spectators were betting on me. I saw Sullivan's shoulders move back. He's making to block, Fogg murmured, so don't swing too hard. I jabbed. A quick, decisive move. Where Sullivan brought up his block, I knocked him back a little. We were both still energetic, though he was looking better than me. I saw his arms tense. I raised my guard, once more protecting my face. Sullivan put up his defenses. We circled each other nervously. We were both still energetic, although he was very better. I threw a heavy punch, putting all my weight behind the blow. Just as Sullivan lifted his arm to block, I pushed him a little. We were both still energetic, though he was still looking better than me. The crowd murmured and whispered. Sullivan's weight moved back. He's making to swing. Then I got ready to duck and dodge, once more protecting my face. While Sullivan punched hard, I deflected his impact breathlessly. I was fading fast. I could not take much more. Well done. He won't be able to swing like that again, my master shouted. And that was my turn. I threw a heavy punch, putting all my weight behind the blow. Sullivan delivered a stinging punch. I overpowered him, landing a sting. We were both all but equally matched, tiring, but still eyeing each other warily. I no longer had the energy for a heavy swing. I jabbed, quick, decisive move, but I had timed it poorly. Sullivan swung low, and the blow slipping past my guard. He was tiring, certainly, but I was all but on my knees. He lifted back his shoulders. I brought up my defenses up once more, protecting my face, just as Sullivan snapped up his block. We circled each other nervously. I could not take much more of this. One more hit would most likely finish me off. He lifted back his shoulders. Next, I kept my guard up, once more protecting my face, while Sullivan brought up his defenses. We circled each other nervously. Sullivan was weak, but he knew he had me. Why not go with a bang? Then I threw a heavy punch, pulling all my weight behind the blow. Sullivan put up his arms to block. I knocked his strength a bit. The fight could not last much longer unless I managed a lucky, solid punch. I saw him shift up onto his tiptoes. I got ready to duck and dodge, once more protecting my face. Just as Sullivan punched hard, I dodged neatly. He was tiring, certainly, but I was all but on my knees. Excellent, now is the time to get him, my master shouted. So I threw a heavy punch, putting all my weight behind the blow, while Sullivan made a lightning uppercut. I burst through his attack, landing a sting. We were both staggering and stumbling around the ring, but he had the upper hand by a hair's breadth. I had less strength myself now. I brought my defenses up, once more protecting my face. Sullivan swung low. The blow landed against my defense. It was too much. I slumped to the ground. Jenner's hands lifted me to my feet and put my jacket over my head. A good show, Monsieur Fogg said gently, though I am afraid we have lost some money. I awoke, still smarting from my boxing match with Sullivan, and my master most generously decided he would fetch breakfast. You are most kind, monsieur. Indeed, he replied, and we cannot have you dropping the tray. Jeez, I can't read. He returned with black coffee and well-buttered toast. A most considerate choice to bring a Frenchman, or at least so I thought, until he began to eat the toast himself and drank the coffee in a slurp. We arrived into New York later that day. I struggled to lift the cases with my tired arms, and we staggered off the train. Oh, about my fault. You signed me up for a fight? Monsieur Fogg looked all but haggard by now. I knew well the dark look in my master's eyes. To the bank. I regarded the bank as we entered. It was a haven of burnished wood and brass fittings with plenty of space and all modern conveniences. You wish to take out more funds? It may take some time. $1,000 in all. We require £5,000. The manager visibly paled. I will have to talk to the head office to make the transfer. Naturally, I expect a reply in 5 working days. I was pickpocketed in New York. seized the thief's hand still in my pocket. "You tangled with the wrong Frenchman!" I exclaimed in triumph. The little thief looked up at me with thick-lashed eyes. I realized belatedly that the thief was a young girl, barely 10. I tightened my grip firmly, and she took the opportunity to curse in thick Irish accent and bite me. I held on, despite the inconvenience, and finally she grinned at me, teeth stained with my precious life's blood. "Are you done, little vampire?" "For now," the girl muttered. "What's it to you?" I looked down at my bloody arm. Truly, it was a salutary lesson not to let my guard down in strange climes. "I should report you." Her face seemed to melt. "Oh, please, sir," she said, all innocent and politeness. "Don't." "I am a Frenchman at heart." I released her. The girl smiled at me somewhat shiftily, paused for a moment, then raced away into the crowd with regrettably my money still in her fist. I immediately located a police officer who regarded me with a curious but not entirely unfriendly expression, most perturbed, I fancy, by my rather fetching attire. "And what's the matter with you?" he asked. "Escaped from the circus?" "I have been robbed," I declared, appalled. The man looked at me with some sympathy before replying, "Don't worry, sir. You'll probably find those clothes are worth something on the second-hand market." And then he moved away along the street, swinging his truncheon and whistling. I returned to the hotel defeated, and soon realized that the girl had also used the conversation with the officer to dip into my pockets once more. I was dejected, 20 pounds the poorer, with nothing good to say about this foul city of ne'er-do-wells and hoodlums. It was with a heavy heart that I watched the sun go down. 80 days had come and gone, and here we were, still making time, and not yet home. We had 6 days to wait until the bank would be ready with our money. So we put up our feet and rested. The wait this close to our deadline was nerve-wracking. We woke ready to be at the bank as soon as it opened its doors. Now we fast forward to time. We returned to the bank as early as possible to collect our funds, and we were ready to depart. We left New York aboard Henrietta, an old Confederate airship converted to a transatlantic mail carrier. We would reach London in 3 days, barring any unexpected delays. The ocean tore along beneath us. I enjoyed talking to no one. There was nothing I needed to know, no one to charm, flatter, or beguile into giving us aid. There was only the wind and time, and we could control neither. Monsieur Fogg looked out at the observation deck windows with perfect calm. Though the wager was lost and he was no doubt ruined, I did not quite know what to feel myself. I spent the remaining time embarking on the writing of this account, though I found already the details of our early adventure had grown vague and indistinct. We tethered at the airship dock in Hyde Park and felt for the first time in 90 days the feel of English soil under our shoes. At long last we had returned to London. Well, we made it. So this has been fun. I don't know what happens if I hit return, but I guess we'll click it and find out. I hailed one of the steam carriages idling on the banks of the Serpentine in Hyde Park. To the nearest pub, I instructed. My master shook his head. To Savile Row, he corrected calmly and turned his face to the window. I had most assuredly lost my wager. Soot and fog thickened the yellow light of the gas lamps as we drove through the London streets. I think I only truly grasped the truth of the matter then, hearing the words of my master's uninflected tones. We had lost the wager, and by only a handful of days. One fewer delay, one speedier journey, and we might well have returned to London in glorious triumph rather than ignominy. My master entered his domicile with his habitual tranquillity, though he instructed me to leave the window shut up so that his neighbors would not mark his return. I prepared his supper, and he ate heartily, as if he were not utterly ruined. Passepartout, he began. Yes, Monsieur Fogg. In the silence that followed, I counted up the vast sums expended, all the obstacles which he had overcome, and those which had delayed us. You have performed your duties with competence and skill, he said, as though remarking upon the weather. But more importantly, you have circumnavigated the globe as my companion. Despite the unfortunate protraction of our journey, he added, it was no small feat. And what will you do now, monsieur? I asked, trying to emulate my master's coolness and aplomb. My course, Monsieur Fogg interjected smoothly, is fully decided upon. We must attempt to journey around the world once more. Once more? I cried. Indeed, Monsieur Fogg said implacably, an intent light glinting in his cold blue eyes. But this time, forewarned and better prepared, we will succeed. Yes, monsieur, I nodded smartly, glad that I had not bothered to unpack our cases. Monsieur Fogg consulted his ledger and tapped his pen. Perhaps this time, he said thoughtfully, a more southerly route. Your journey around the world is complete. Adventure Phileas Fogg loses wager. Fogg blames exploding Mississippi paddle steamer, American train robbers, and contracting cholera for 90-day journey. Well, it took me 90 days. I visited 20 of the 169 cities. Sure, that's a lot of miles. Well, yeah. I'm in debt. That's a lot of money. No, spent a lot of money. I don't know what that means. Flamboyant. Woo, I'm good ballet. Okay, well, getting him to like me was hard. Well, anyway, that was this journey. If you would like to see me try again, please leave a comment down below, and I will do it again. Otherwise, it might be a minute before I come back to this game, because that took a minute. Yeah, but no, it was great. A lot of fun. Maybe next time we can figure out a different route.